Number 10. Alpha Flight. This might be a controversial way to start off this list, but I truly do believe that Alpha Flight can be more powerful than the Avengers team, especially if we're talking about consistent teamwork, which the Avengers members sometimes struggle with due to, well, butting heads with each other. I mean, people on the Avengers have straight up killed their other teammates before. That is just a fact. I mean, I did a whole list about the amount of times Iron Man has been basically killed by his teammates, and after talking it over with Andrew, it seems like Alpha Flight also has a better system in place for making sure their team not only works smoothly, but also that members are well trained before even earning their place on the team due to the existence of both Beta Flight and Gamma Flight, which were initially used as training teams. Although Gamma Flight has kind of become something else in recent years, but yes. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by giving this video a little like? Click that thumbs up. Number 9. Midnight Suns. Midnight Suns is basically Marvel's main magical team. At least currently that's who we got. Midnight Suns typically deal with threats that are more mystical or supernatural in nature. They were brought together initially by Doctor Strange to fight against Lilith and her small army of demonic offspring known as the Lilin, which I mean, of course this team would be brought together by Doctor Strange, right? Each member of the original team roster had interacted with the Lilin before, which was what tied them all together. Team members and leaders have included Doctor Strange, Wong, Blade, Morbius, Magik, Nico Minoru, Wolverine, Zoe Laveau, Kushala, Dr. Voodoo, Elsa Bloodstone, multiple Ghost Riders, Hannibal King, Hellstrom, Iron Fist, Man-Thing, Jennifer Kale, Ben Reilly, Victoria Montesi, and Werewolf by Night. It's a lot of supernatural and mystical people. Number 8. Web Warriors. The Web Warriors are a fantastic multiversal team that spun out of the events of Spider-Verse. But even before they existed in the comics, they and the Spider-Verse were inspired by the team-ups of multiversal Spider-Man in the 90s Spider-Man animated series. The Web Warriors were brought together by the multiversal threat of the Inheritors, who hunted down various alternate spider people, known as Spider Totems, across the Marvel multiverse. After they were defeated during the Spider-Verse event and the dust had settled, the Web Warriors were created to defend those worlds, who were left afterwards without a hero. Considering how powerful Peter Parker's Spider-Man is, I think you can understand how a team made up of various alternate versions of the character would be off the charts when it comes to their power level. I mean, Spider-Man himself is pretty crazy, like a team of Spider-Men. I wish we had an Avengers team that was actually just like different spider people. That could be pretty cool. Number 7. Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four, despite being often smaller in number, though they have expanded beyond that number over the years, is still mightier, I'd say, than the Avengers. But I also feel like that's to be expected. After all, the FF were one of the first Marvel teams and are referred to fondly as Marvel's first family. So if anything, I consider them kind of like the first team. The Fantastic Four usually is made up of the 4 initial friends and relatives who are forever changed by exposure to cosmic rays during their first voyage out into space. At least that's the original origin story. The team has had countless heroes join their ranks here and there over the years. Well, you know Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, and The Thing. Some other members on the FF roster have included the Hulk, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, Storm, She-Hulk, Nova, Moon Girl, Devil Dinosaur, Crystal, and Black Panther, among others. Number 6. The Quiet Council. They aren't really a team of superheroes, but the title of this video is simply Marvel Teams More Powerful Than the Avengers, and the Quiet Council, I would consider them to be a team still. They're a team of folks in the Marvel universe. Granted, their team is more about protecting their power and their nation of Krakoa, but hey, I think it still counts. The Krakoan Quiet Council as such is composed of not just mutant superheroes, but mutant villains as well, as Krakoa is said to be a place for all mutants, where past misdeeds are forgiven in the name of creating a better tomorrow and a safe haven for all mutants. Current members include some of the most prominent, iconic, and powerful mutants in all of existence: Destiny, Hope Summers, Storm, Exodus, Professor X, Emma Frost, Mr. Sinister, Captain Kate Pryde, Mystique, and Sebastian Shaw. Formerly, the council also featured such additional powerhouses as Apocalypse, Magneto, and Jean Grey, besides. Number 5. X-Men. I mean, Of course I was going to put the X-Men on this list. Y'all know me, I'm a huge mutant fan. And the premier mutant team in the comics, of course, is the X-Men. I've also loved that over the years the X-Men has become more of a global team than just necessarily an American one. Unlike the Avengers, which has tended to remain mostly American in terms of their prominent team members throughout the years. I mean, most of the people on the Avengers tend to be American, not always, but I feel like the X-Men is a little bit more global in that regard. Although they do also have a lot of American members. I mean, based in New York. It's Marvel Comics. X-Men's current and previous lineup have also been exceptionally strong, and even the OG X-Men roster featured some mutants who are still considered the most powerful even today, and who are still around, of course, in the comics even today. The current roster features Cyclops, Firestar, Forge, Iceman, Havoc, Magic, Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, and Synch. Honestly, Synch is also alone just so amazing, and has taken the meaning of teamwork to another level, I think. Synch. Such an underrated character that now is getting his time in the spotlight. Number 4. Eternals. The Eternals are another team that deserve more love when it comes to the comics and when it comes to their powers. They're a team made up of literal immortal beings who are extremely resistant to dying, but up until recently anyways, even if they did die, they would actually quickly return to life thanks to the machine which rebuilds and resurrects them and is integrated, or was integrated, with the planet Earth, which is actually itself a living mechanism of sorts. The Eternals recently had a killer comic series written by Kieran Gillen that I would also highly recommend you check out. This is a series that will make you a fan if you weren't already. The Eternals all also possess a unique power comparable to a powerful ability of mutant villain Apocalypse. They can manipulate and alter their own molecular structure, having complete control of it, and some, like Circe, can even manipulate matter in general, be it organic or inorganic. Number 3. God Squad. The God Squad was brought together to combat another group of gods, the Skrull Pantheon. The team made their first appearance in Incredible Hercules issue 117, but while Hercules would become their leader, they were actually brought together by Athena's command. Although she didn't serve on the team, a bunch of other super powerful individuals and gods did. With Hercules leading, their roster over time also included Thor, Circe, the Silver Surfer, Ajax, Amadeus Cho, Snowbird, Mikaboshi, Adam, Galactus, and Venus. The God Squad only made a few appearances, but I still think they're a super cool team, and I'm still disappointed we didn't get to see them in Thor Love and Thunder. I was kind of hoping. God Squad, but alas. Number 2. The Annihilators. The Annihilators are an insane cosmic team, and you know how I feel about the cosmic world of Marvel. It's probably one of the most powerful areas. The Annihilators first appeared in Thanos Imperative Devastation issue number 1, and were created by Dan Abnett, Andy Lanning, and Miguel Sepulveda, during a time when the Guardians were getting a refresh by Abnett and Lanning in the comics. The team was actually inspired by Star-Lord himself, who had an idea for a truly badass team of galactic guardians, which Cosmo put into action. The team has featured Beta Ray Bill, Silver Surfer, Gladiator, Icon, Quasar, and Ronan the Accuser. At one point they used their powers to combine two suns together and prevented them from going supernova. So yeah, that's the power level that we're talking about. Number 1. The Defenders. I feel like the Defenders is a team that is often forgotten, but is randomly like one of the best superhero teams we've ever seen from Marvel. Perhaps this also has to do with the fact that none of its members ever really wanted to join or be there, at least not initially. The Defenders was the name given initially to the reluctant team up of the Hulk, Namor, and Doctor Strange, with Strange acting as the de facto leader of the team. Also, just having Doctor Strange as the leader of any team makes it pretty impressive, hence why the Midnight Suns are also on here. When it comes to Avengers teams, he tends to be more elusive, and even solo, he's known for being a powerhouse, so combine him with other powerhouses on a team, albeit ones, you know, in different categories like the Hulk and Namor, and you can see how this team becomes seemingly unstoppable. In fact, I feel like the fact that each of these heroes, you know, kind of has their own thing going on is what makes the Defenders so great. And they've also had a lot of other people join them throughout the years that have also been insane. As long as they all happen to be working together, the Defenders is a pretty great team, which of course, especially in the beginning, wasn't always the case. But hey, they figured it out. Number 10. Gamma Corps. Not to be confused with Gamma Flight, the space program, or the other Gamma Flight, Alpha Flight training team. The Gamma Corps are actually made up of various different Gamma mutates, who basically were initially brought together to be used in hunting down the Hulk, believing him to be responsible for their fates and their mutations. They later learned, however, the truth and ended up turning on the Illuminati as a result. Team members included General Riker, their initial leader, Timothy Wilkerson, known as Prodigy, Gray, Griffin, Mr. Gideon, and Mess. While they were rescued by the Hulk from a Hulk AI and later depowered, I would say that at their height they could stand a chance against a more classic Avengers roster. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by giving us a thumbs up? Number 9. Thunderbolts. The Thunderbolts might not be as good at teamwork in some cases, but they are definitely more interesting than the Avengers when it comes to their story, and despite being initially made up secretly of a group of villains led by Baron Zemo, the public even came to accept them as heroes. Over the years, their lineup has changed dramatically, and currently they are actually more of a mishmash of like less heroic folks and more heroic folks, although the fact remains that the Thunderbolts has always remained a more heroic, at least at heart, or at least anti-hero based team. One of their current members also happens to be Spectrum, aka Monica Rambeau, who is known for packing a punch. Number 8. Titans 3. Titans 3 is a group that is similar but different to another one I had on part 1 of my list. It is basically the Defenders, sort of, but also may predate the Defenders, I believe, in terms of their appearance. The Titans 3 only appeared in a couple of issues of Submariner back in the 70s, making their first appearance in issue number 34 and their last in issue number 35. This team was led by Namor the Submariner and was brought together to save the world, as many great superhero teams have been brought together in the past. Joining Namor were the Hulk and the Silver Surfer, so no Doctor Strange here, but still a very powerful team I think, even with only 3 of them. Number 7. Star Masters. Probably not a team you get to hear about often, I'd think, on YouTube, so let me get you up to speed here. Star Masters were brought together by the accusation that Quasar was guilty of murder, having believed to have massacred basically a bunch of people on a starship. Those that made up the team were the ones who believed him to be innocent. I also just love Wendell Vaughn and feel like we don't really get to talk about him too much on the channel for how powerful he is. Probably because Wendell, aka Quasar, isn't super prominent in the comics anymore these days, especially not Wendell as Quasar, because now we also have Avril. However, Wendell has appeared in the Guardians of the Galaxy series in recent years. While Quasar was obviously on the team, so was Beta Ray Bill, Silver Surfer, Morphex, and Zenith. After Quasar was proven innocent, the team became more focused on maintaining peace throughout the cosmos. Basically, like OP cosmic peacekeepers, which I also just love as a team idea. Number 6. Transformers. Well, it's weird to think of the Transformers as a Marvel team, since, you know, they are with Hasbro. Marvel also happens to be the place where they kinda got their comic book start. And recently, IDW did lose the rights to the comics for Transformers. Although it's lucky for Marvel, and I do love their work, it is a little sad because I was also actually interested in the IDW Transformers stuff, which I guess I could go back and read. Or well, I guess they can't reprint it, so I'd have to find old stuff. Oh well. I'm sure there's still lots of awesome stuff in store in the future for Transformers comics, no matter who the rights belong to, because they're just a really cool property. And either way, the team will remain unstoppable. I'm still waiting for an Avengers vs Transformers event, so hopefully that is something we could also see in the future. Number 5. Multiversal Masters of Evil. The Multiversal Masters of Evil were actually powerful enough to defeat the Avengers. So this one, actually the proof is in the pudding in this case. The Multiversal Masters of Evil were actually powerful enough to defeat the Avengers, or rather the Avengers of 1 million BC, aka the prehistoric Avengers, but still, even when they went back in the day, the first Avengers were still some of the most powerful people on or off the planet of Earth, so I feel like that's still really impressive. I know before, in part 1, some people in the comments wanted to know which Avengers team we were comparing these other teams to. We're like, how can you compare them if you're not telling us the parameters, Amanda? Well, you know, I don't really have a lot of time to go through the parameters, but what I will say is I'm more thinking of these teams in comparisons generally speaking, so meaning any and all versions of the team can really be contrasted to each other. No specific parameters per se, although I am leaning more towards like classic Avengers, I guess when I'm thinking of it. These are more teams that would just be considered more powerful than at least one of the Avengers rosters. And we already know the Multiversal Masters of Evil succeeded there because they already beat the prehistoric Avengers. The Multiversal Masters of Evil are different from the standard team, and they actually include Doom Supreme, King Killmonger, Black Skull, Dark Phoenix, Ghost Goblin, and Kid Thanos. Number 4. Squadron Supreme. Squadron Supreme is kind of like Marvel's version of the Justice League. And I know what you're thinking, but wait a minute, Amanda. I thought the Avengers was like Marvel's version of the Justice League. Well, Yes and no. The Avengers team doesn't really have powerhouses in the same way as the Justice League does, and Squadron Supreme kinda does that a little bit better than the Avengers does, if we're comparing. Marvel even went so far as to rename the alternate reality version of them that also appeared in 2021's Heroes Reborn event the Squadron Supreme of America. Get it? Like the Justice League of America. Their ranks typically include Nighthawk, Dr. Spectrum, Blur, Hyperion, and Warrior Woman or Princess Power, whatever name she's going by, aka Zarda Shelton. She goes by both depending on which version of her we're talking about. Number 3. The Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club might not be one of the first picks you have when you think of a team that can take on and defeat the Avengers, but you know me, I'm always thinking about mutants and mutant teams. And it is important to note that before the Phoenix became a member of the Avengers team, and before the Phoenix Force was retconned to be a part of Thor's origins, it was well known for its attachment to the X-Men, and specifically one mutant in particular who was a member, Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl. In fact, the Phoenix Force is an entity that was created by Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum, and one of the first places where the Phoenix Force became fully unhinged was during the Phoenix's time at the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club was once a well-known villainous organization that was committed to using wealth and influence to manipulate and eventually conquer the world, sort of. Currently, the organization has been rebranded though, and presents as being a business that leans more towards heroic pursuits, but still often profitable pursuits. Number 2. Nova Corps. When you think about it, the Nova Corps, despite having been destroyed by the Universal Church of Truth, is probably one of the most powerful organizations or groups likely in the universe. Originally, they were known as Xandar's Line of Defense, but as they grew, they ended up expanding the area under their protection, eventually extending to the whole of the Andromeda Galaxy, and I mean at least part of the Milky Way, as Earth also fell under their jurisdiction, or they, decided to take it under their wing. And while yes, as of Annihilation Scourge, they may be gone right now, with only Richard Rider as Nova surviving, it's more than likely that we will eventually see them return in the comics at some point. And usually when we do, I mean, they're just really powerful, so we should acknowledge that. Number 1. Elders of the Universe. The Elders of the Universe are some of the oldest beings to exist out in the universe. In fact, they are so old that in some cases their origins remain a mystery to us to this day, lost to time. They don't always work together, preferring sometimes to kind of do their own thing, but when they do end up joining forces for anything, they're also pretty unstoppable. They have worked together to take on Galactus and were for a while holders of the Infinity Stones back when they were known as the Infinity Gems in the comics. And in fact, I feel like if they came together to protect those, maybe Thanos would have never taken them? I don't know. Among the Elders of the Universe are the Challenger, the Champion Trichoslaterus, Ego, the Living Planet, the In-Between, the Collector, the Grand Master, the Profiteer, and Lady Karina Korvac, the wife of one of the Avengers' greatest enemies, Korvac. There's also a lot more of them out there than we know, which means if they were to all assemble, it would likely be a scary time for just about everyone else in the Marvel Universe. It would be pretty scary. Number 10. Cull Borsen. While the Serpent is not as powerful by himself, like Darkseid, he doesn't usually come alone. During Fear itself, he recruited his own allies when he activated the Hammers of the Worthy, who found their own hosts, causing global chaos and destruction, and giving the villains and corrupted heroes who wielded those hammers immense power. Cull Borsen is Thor's uncle, who was imprisoned by his own brother Odin, and craves power that he claims was rightfully his before he was locked away. Fear gives him strength, and while Darkseid might not be afraid of him, there are plenty people on Earth who could power him up with their fear were he to return. Inevitably, Thor did defeat the Serpent, but it cost him his life at the time, and all the heroes of Earth were still kinda needed to come together in the fight against all the fear that Cull Borsen's return had unleashed on the world. Number 9. Vulcan. Vulcan has a great darkness that seems to be permanently lurking within him, which generally leads to him going berserk when it comes to how he approaches attacking, or more specifically, decimating, usually, his enemies. Vulcan is known as Gabriel Summers, the youngest Summers brother of the three. In the past, he has also been known as the Emperor of the warrior race known as the Shi'ar, and is an Omega level mutant. When it comes to energy manipulation and generation, he's probably the most powerful of the three brothers, just based on his sheer power levels alone. Vulcan even went toe-to-toe with one of the most powerful characters in Marvel, Adam Warlock, who at the time had joined up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and yeah, Vulcan kicked his butt pretty effortlessly, looking super evil all the while, by the way. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love lists like this and you want to see us pit, I don't know, maybe even more Marvel villains against Darkseid, although Yeah, Darkseid is pretty powerful. Please be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up and commenting below. Number 8. Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom definitely has the prowess to defeat Darkseid. While he might not be powerful enough initially to defeat Darkseid, Doom is well known for his determination and for going to great lengths to achieve things that most would tell him were basically not possible. He's kind of like the person that also comes in the Marvel Universe to solve problems that seem otherwise unsolvable, even when we have like all of the geniuses on it. He has masterful plans, and I believe that if Doom had to go up against Darkseid, he would find the power that he needed to defeat Darkseid. We've seen him take power from plenty of insanely powerful people in comics and video games before, like Kilgrave, Odin, the Beyonders, Scarlet Witch, and Molecule Man. I'm just saying, people are definitely going to be like, yeah, but Dr. Doom isn't already at that power level, and I'm going to be like, yeah, well, Dr. Doom's great, so he wins, that's it. It's all coming up Doom, baby. Number 7. Enchantress. Enchantress is vastly powerful when it comes to her magics. She's one of the most powerful magic users in all of Asgard and within the Marvel multiverse. And even though she's a magic user, which are typically known for being pretty squishy in general, she is surprisingly strong because she's also Asgardian. Enchantress has been shown to seduce a number of men with her charms and beauty, except for those with the strongest will. She is trained with various Asgardian magicians and even was Karnilla's student at one point. She can conjure up magic strong enough to destroy a god, though weirdly not strong enough to destroy Vision. Android loophole, I guess. She's easily defeated other immensely powerful magic users, and I'm sure that if she and Darkseid faced off, she'd prove that Enchantress should never be underestimated in battle. Number 6. Genesis / Annihilation. Genesis is the wife of Apocalypse, and as such will be his stand-in for this list. While there are some who compare the all-powerful might of Darkseid and Apocalypse to one another, also, I mean, they look pretty similar just in terms of character design, there is a character even more powerful than Apocalypse who I believe, based on the comparison of DC and Marvel's characters, could pose an even greater threat to the new god. That, of course, is Genesis. We met Genesis and came to know her as a foe over the course of the Ten of Swords event during the Otherworld tournament. She was one of the chosen champions of Araco who fought in that tournament. Genesis received a power-up as the avatar for the Elder God of Amenth, known at the time as Annihilation. But even without her mask and without that title, Genesis was still shown to be an Omega level mutant more powerful than her husband. So if we're comparing Darkseid to Apocalypse, I think Genesis is... I'm just saying. I think she might be more powerful. Number 5. Gore. It's all in the name for Gore. Darkseid is known as a new god, and Gore is the god butcher, so I think you can imagine how this might go down. Gore fights wielding the all-black Necrosword, a symbiote and weapon created by Null. Gore can use this weapon to devour his enemies from the inside out, basically. It's pretty gross. This kind of inside out attack with the all black has been shown before to be powerful enough for him to defeat even an immortal Asgardian hero like Thor, and fairly easily too. What's more, the all black that Gore wields is also powerful enough to slice through the sun and the moon as well. Now that is one sharp and deadly blade. When armed with the all black, Gore also becomes virtually immortal, as though he weren't resilient and strong enough on his own. Even if you kill him through the all black, he can basically return, making him indestructible and pretty much undefeatable. How can you defeat someone if you can't actually get rid of them, you know what I mean? I don't know. Number 4. Galactus. I mean, let's just talk about the sheer size of Galactus to begin with, and already we're making a pretty good case for him taking the fight, in my opinion. Galactus is the devourer of worlds, and Darkseid could be the inhibitor of a world that Galactus would end up destroying. Even when Galactus is hungry, his strength is pretty great. He has been shown as being able to engage in a fight with the Phoenix even while in such a state, which, I mean, I wouldn't expect him to win because Phoenix, but I also think that is immensely impressive given how powerful the Phoenix and Phoenix Force is in general. Number 3. Null. Null is shown as being one of the biggest bads currently in the Marvel Universe with the King in Black event, and he has proven time and time again just how hard it is to stop him. He's relentless, doesn't give up, doesn't back down, and is very hard to actually kill or injure. Like Darkseid, he also likes to raise worlds, but he has symbiotic dragons and is known for being one of the galaxy's oldest evils. Null is basically darkness incarnate, so while I believe that watching a fight between these two would be very exciting and interesting to read, in the end I would personally be betting on Null to come out victorious. Number 2. Dark Phoenix. Obviously, Dark Phoenix is one of the most powerful villains we've ever seen in the Marvel Universe, and as such is definitely someone who could mess up Darkseid. Dark Phoenix has destroyed entire worlds and could reshape all of reality if they wanted to, especially when we're talking about the powerful marriage of the Phoenix Force and its often most desired perfect host, Jean Grey. When Jean goes dark, you definitely want to watch out. And even Darkseid should be shaken in his boots if that version of Phoenix and Jean comes a-knockin'. I mean, we should all be shaking in our boots, really. Number 1. The Beyonder. Initially, the Beyonder wasn't even from the Marvel multiverse that we have come to know, but another multiverse completely separate. In that multiverse, the Beyonder was everything, and everything was him, making him pretty much the god of that multiverse. A hole into our multiverse was created when Owen Reese experienced the accident that turned him into Molecule Man, and it was through this hole the Beyonder became aware of this Marvel multiverse, and basically decided ultimately to come on over and to mess with it. At least that was the initial backstory. Later on his story would be altered somewhat and we learned that there was actually an entire race of Beyonders, but either way the Beyonder remains one of the most powerful villains around at Marvel, especially in those older days, considering that he is beyond multiversal and can with ease, and even sometimes without even intention, destroy multiple realities and reshape multiverses. Number 10. Vanisher. An old school villain who also almost single-handedly defeated the X-Men back in the day. Almost. So close. Well, actually he kind of did defeat the X-Men team, but fortunately Professor X butt in to save the day. And he was only able to defeat Vanisher by wiping his mind and making him forget who he was and what he was capable of, which I think goes to show just how powerful of a villain he is. He was the first teleporter the team really encountered, proving just how crazy powerful teleporters are. Vanisher is also considered to be a super fast teleporter, and his power limits thus far have been pretty much undefined, even when he did resurface years later. I would consider him to be at a higher level though, just based on what I've seen thus far. He also was able to teleport himself safely just instinctually, even when teleporting to a place he's never seen or been to before, avoiding teleporting partially or fully into any solid objects, which of course could kill him, and which is like a great danger if you're a teleporter. You just teleport somewhere and now part of you's in a car and you're like, well, I guess I'm dead now. That's it. Number 9. Living Diamond. Okay, so someone I also think we need to talk about who needs some kind of redemption in the comics is Jack Winters, aka Jack O'Diamonds, or Living Diamond. He was one of the first X-Men villains whom Professor X saved Scott Summers from, thereby recruiting him to his X-Men team. Living Diamond's mutant power was believed to be radiation resistance, but he was also shown to be able to teleport short distances, had telepathy, and had a diamond form. Does that sound familiar at all? Telepathy with a diamond form. Somehow Living Diamond was way too easily defeated by a vibration beam which shattered him. I know Living Diamond is dead now and was undead at one point, but I really feel like considering how OP Emma Frost has become, Living Diamond should also get a second chance to prove just how powerful he in theory should be. I mean, if you got all that, how were you so easily defeated? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about the unexpected yet powerful villains that we don't usually get to talk about, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade is one of those villains who feels super ridiculous with his grandiose plans for Murder World, but in reality when he actually manages to achieve plots like Murder World, he's actually quite scary. I mean, getting a sneak peek into just what a ludicrous and horrifying operation he'd run in Hellions really made me appreciate just how dangerous Arcade can be if he does manage to get enough hostages, that is, to control people into working with him so he can create his murder world. In Hellions number 9, it's revealed that the trap Mastermind walked the Hellions, and prior to that Mr. Sinister, into was a trap laid by Arcade himself. Gasp, what a reveal. Arcade's plan was to use Sinister's Hellions as leverage to encourage Sinister to work for him. Sinister didn't really seem to actually care about the Hellions, and he basically just agreed outright, although Arcade still chose to forcefully remove some of his teeth for for fun before putting him to work. He wanted Sinister to make clones for him for Murder World, and had his plan worked, it would have been a real horror show. However, Sinister made a counteroffer to Mastermind, and instead the two double-crossed Arcade. Still, that whole 3-issue arc made me believe in the power of Arcade. If he has the right allies, he could be really crazy. I'm here for some sort of plot where Arcade tries to just turn the world into Murder World or something. If that hasn't happened yet, someone write that for me, please. Maybe I should write that down. Maybe I should write that. I don't know. Marvel, call me. I got ideas apparently. Number 7. The Blob. The Blob is a villain that we don't often get to talk about on these supervillain lists. He tends to fall by the wayside, but truly he's pretty unstoppable. And when he puts his mind to something, or when he puts his body to something, he's a terribly tough villain to defeat or even move. The Blob was one of the first villains to appear in the original X-Men series, and when he did, he gave the team of youngsters a really tough time. He also attacked them with a circus. The Blob actually didn't start out as a villain, but became one due to the influence of Professor X and the X-Men themselves. Also just thinking back and the amount of times that the X-Men have fought circuses or been trapped in circuses, or that happens a lot. That's a recurring theme. Initially, the X-Men attempted to recruit the Blob, but after the Blob refused to accept their offer, he managed to escape before Xavier could wipe his mind of their identities. This caused problems later on down the road, but really it was how the X-Men treated him after he refused to join, and kind of his own self-esteem, and then later his overcompensating sense of superiority that turned him into a villain. I wonder if the Blob actually could have been an ally if this whole scenario had just gone a little bit differently. The Blob is super strong, durable, and virtually immovable thanks to his ability to manipulate gravitational mass, which is pretty powerful. He also later gained a secondary mutation which gave him a liquid form, but he hasn't really exhibited a ton of control with his secondary power set. But he also has liquid form. That's on the resume of powers now. Number 6. Red Death. Also known as Kandra, Red Death currently has a very Scarlet Witch looking vibe going on, and I gotta say, I'm feeling it. And just like Scarlet Witch, she is not someone who you should underestimate. Kandra is part of the Externals, and while she isn't one of the most memorable of that mutant villain team, she's still someone who is super powerful. Technically, just being an External comes with a pretty big dose of power. The Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, a different team entirely, are a group of immortal mutants basically. They have had various roles throughout history. One more prominent one that folks might remember Kandra from is her role as Benefactress, when we learned of her history with Gambit and the Thieves and Assassins Guilds of New Orleans during Gambit's miniseries. In fact, that was actually where Kandra first was introduced in the comics, making her initial appearance in Gambit issue number 1 from the 1993 miniseries. Although the way they approach that introduction, you wouldn't necessarily maybe know that that was her first appearance, because she kind of shows up like, hey, you know me, I'm Kandra. And I'm like, do we know you? Who are you? But it's alright, she's pretty powerful. Number 5. Moira X. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have succeeded. Even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer it to those who wanted it, Destiny knew that any mutant cure would essentially become weaponized and then forced on mutants, regardless of their own wants and desires. For those who haven't been reading along recently with the events of the current X-Men line of comics, it was revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose powers were basically reincarnation in her own form. Basically, she dies and then she comes back to life as a baby and lives her life again. But when Moira dies, she ends up being reborn as herself, but with all the memories of that past life. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of 616, which also seems to be tied to Moira's current life, which I believe is her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a gun of Forge's design, which basically turns mutants into humans. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information, and it was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being their last hurrah in terms of Moira's plan. Time will tell if Moira becomes more villainous, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just based on where she was heading in this story. And when or if that does happen, you better watch out. Danger is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a villain who surfaced because they were basically being mistreated by Professor X, who had decided to ignore the fact that the training room had become sentient and was itself a technologically based mutant. Eventually, Danger decided, enough of this shit. It's time to get some sweet revenge. The crazy thing about Danger is although we don't think of her too much, she really would be a pretty strong opponent to the X-Men considering she trained them, and as such would know their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, I think that even is mentioned in the comics at one point. She was also considered to be an extinction level threat that caused Steve Rogers great worry in Heroic Age X-Men, which is kinda like a glimpse into his tactical commentary diary. So if you wanted to read that, it exists. So despite not thinking about Danger too much, we all probably should in case she ever decides to, go the villain route again. Destroy everyone. Because she could probably do that. Extinction level, friends. Number 3, Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly or at least outwardly powerful when it comes to what she's capable of or her power set, and for this reason, many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why we'd advise against that. Inferno, issue number 4. In the newest Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she almost was successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her. Mystique here proves that not only is her power set OP, but really that her mind and sense of cunning is what makes her so dangerous, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. Number 2, Destiny. Destiny has to be one of the most underestimated villains in recent years in comics. We have seen her resurface as a considerably dangerous villain in the current X books, and I'm personally loving it. Destiny was dead for quite a few years and actually got to mostly stay dead for much of them. Her mutant power allows her to see potential futures. She can see things that might come to pass, and it seems as though the more likely the future becomes, the clearer her vision of it is. She can also see more immediate futures when in the middle of a conflict. It was because of this power and Moira's personal grudge against and fear of Destiny that she remained unresurrected. But something you really shouldn't underestimate when it comes to Destiny is the power of love. Mystique was already told by Destiny before her death that if there came a time when mutants could be resurrected and they refused to bring her back, that Mystique should basically burn this new world to the ground. And Mystique's love of Destiny gave her the motivation to basically bring Krakoa to its knees with her machinations to not only return Destiny, but also put her in a position of power. Precogs and love are a powerful mix. Number 1, Madeleine Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. Madeleine Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno event. Currently in the comics, Madeleine Pryor is making a comeback, returning at the end of the Hellion series after being killed as part of the comic's first arc. The Madeleine Pryor that was killed was definitely feeling pretty evil and threatened to destroy the entire Hellions team before they even started. The returning Madeleine, who has been resurrected by the Five, is at least putting on appearances that she's more level-headed, but in reality it seems the dark side of her still bubbles just beneath. Madeleine Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and she's a clone of Jean, so although she often gets forgotten and downplayed, she really shouldn't be considering just how dangerous and powerful she is, because Jean is also that and Maddie is also that too. She has the potential at least. Often people try to downplay Maddie because she's a Sinister created clone, but that feels very unfair. She's also got like a spark of the Phoenix Force in her, so should that count for something? I think so. Number 10, Scarecrow. While Scarecrow didn't specifically take out the Hulk, he did take out the person who is often known as the Hulk in the comics, Bruce Banner. While Bruce Banner was traveling the countryside, he found himself drawn to a town via missing persons reports, a town that the villain Scarecrow just so happened to be tormenting, hence why, people were going missing. The Scarecrow had taken up residence in the town's movie theater, Emerald Cinema, and used the townspeople's greatest fears against them by forcing them to watch them play out on the movie screen. When it came to Bruce, his greatest fear that he, as the Hulk, would destroy everything was used against him and was so horrifying that it actually killed him. Fortunately, this happened during Immortal Hulk Time of Monsters issue number 1, and as is established in the Immortal Hulk series, when night fell, the Hulk returned, and this time around, Scarecrow was no match for Bruce's vengeful green alter ego. So while initially it may have appeared as though Scarecrow was more powerful, in the end he was proven to be no match for the Hulk's true rage, which is why we're ranking him lowest on this list. Number 9. Circus of Crime. The Circus of Crime managed to best the Hulk in issue 217 of The Incredible Hulk back in 1977, although this isn't the only time that the Circus of Crime would torment the Hulk. Here the Hulk ends up befriending a circus, not the Circus of Crime, but instead the Circus of Lost Souls. However, the Circus of Crime ends up being in pursuit of the Circus of Lost Souls because they want their most beautiful member, Miriam. It turns out Miriam is a sea nymph, or siren of the sea if you will, who the Circus of Crime's ringmaster hopes will be able to lead them to treasure. The Circus of Crime successfully catch up to the Circus of Lost Souls and capture them, including their newest ally, the Hulk. The Hulk ends up being hypnotized by the ringmaster. However, while he is defeated by the Circus of Crime here, Hulk ends up fighting back later in this same issue. And when the ringmaster attempts to hypnotize Hulk again, due to his rage at Miriam being in danger, Hulk is actually able to resist being hypnotized this time around. In the end, he saves Miriam and is able to return her to the sea. Still, this wouldn't be the only time the Circus of Crime would cross paths and threaten to defeat the Hulk. Weirdly enough, Circus of Crime. Not one of the most powerful teams you'd think of, but hey, they got a leg up sometimes on Hulk. Number 8. Wolverine. I know what you're thinking, bub, but wait a minute, Wolverine isn't a villain, and while usually I would agree with you, in this instance he actually kind of was. And if you consider the Hulk and Wolverine's first meeting and fight in the comics, Logan's first appearance there made him appear initially as more of an antagonist. But the fight I actually want to focus on between these two is when Wolverine was made to become Apocalypse's Horseman of Death and faced off with the Green Giant. While Wolverine also didn't technically trounce Hulk completely, being given the option to behead him but ultimately not following through, he still won the fight technically in issue 145 of Wolverine and could have even killed the Hulk. Well, at least, you know, momentarily. As now we know the Hulk is actually immortal. In the end, Wolverine's hesitation would allow the Hulk to smash Wolverine and escape. Although, thanks to Wolverine's healing factor, he would also quickly recover. He gets smashed a lot in that fight actually, and he's constantly like, I'm better, I'm good, I'm Wolverine. Rah! Number 7. Bi-Beast. Bi-Beast is a weird creature. He first appeared in The Incredible Hulk in issue 169, where he actually beat the Hulk so hard that he caused him to transform back into Bruce Banner. The Bi-Beast is a very strange villain. He is an android with 2 heads, one with knowledge of fighting and war and the other with knowledge of culture and civilization. He was created by the Bird People, which were once an avian race that were related basically to the Inhumans. They ended up dying out, but the Bi-Beast lived on. Their creation. He forces Bruce to fix the once glorious, now failing machines of the Bird People's once great city. Bruce eventually would transform back into the Hulk and escape the Bi-Beast when other villains came to attack that city, but he was still bested by the Bi-Beast initially, so that is important to note. And later on in the comics, a second Bi-Beast would appear and attempt to torment the Hulk during his adventures pretty much regularly for a period of time. Bi-Beast, one that we have all forgotten. R.I.P. Bi-Beast. Number 6. Lord Armageddon. Lord Armageddon, or Lord Armageddon, is a cosmic warlord who rules over the Trojan Empire as their king. He had beef with Hulk because he blamed him for the death of his son Trauma, or Trauma. I'm just gonna call him Trauma, but just so you know how it's pronounced in the comics. That's how it is. Armageddon proved powerful enough to handily defeat the Hulk in his own book, An Incredible Hulk, which was also where Lord Armageddon made his first appearance in issue number 413, starting off, of course, with a bang. However, when he forced the Hulk to engage the device that would resurrect his son Trauma later on, and Armageddon saw that the Hulk was not reluctant at all to basically do so, Armageddon felt respect for the Green Behemoth. Instead, he opted not to kill the Hulk thanks to this newfound respect. But, you know, that was a pretty close one because Lord Armageddon's pretty nuts. He's a 90s villain, so you know how it is in the 90s. People went crazy. Lots of cool, crazy villains from that time. Number 5. Namor. Namor is more of an anti-hero than a straight-up villain, but he's done plenty of villainous things in his time, and even has teamed up with the likes of Fantastic Four villain Dr. Doom, and has for years been known as a major antagonist to Black Panther, with Namor's Atlantis and Black Panther's Wakanda often being engaged in war or other such hostilities. And while many people don't think of Namor as being a powerhouse, he really is, and he deserves to be thought of that way because he is a powerhouse. Especially if you try to fight him while he's in his underwater element. Don't try to do that. And yet, the Hulk has done that time and time again. And guess how that has worked out for him? Well, not very well. Pretty much every time these two have gone up against one another, Namor has been the victor. With Hulk standing, not much of a chance fighting Namor underwater. However, it should be noted that Namor and the Hulk have also been powerhouses together when teamed up. That is, as long as they can remain united and not get distracted by thoughts of when and how best to, betray each other, which also happens a lot with them. Happens a lot with Namor in general, I think. Actually. Number 4. Umar. Umar is the sister of Dormammu. She is known as a powerful sorceress and villain who sometimes works alongside her brother when she's not busy devising her own devious plots. She proved her power over the Hulk in a less conventional way. Their battle against one another that I'm focusing on here had less to do with fists flying and more to do with stamina. At one point, Umar gets her hands on the Hulk, with him having been trapped in the Dark Dimension during his time on the Defenders team. Instead of tormenting the Hulk, she sees potential in him and decides she'll make him her servant and possibly her paramour. The two get steamy, but Umar wins their tussle as the Hulk's passions are too short-lived for her, and he passes out after a few brief minutes, leaving Umar unsatisfied and, well, pretty unimpressed. And proving that at least her appetites are far more powerful than the Hulk's. Number 3. Dormammu. Of course, even when the Hulk was captured during the first Defenders story arc of the 2005 volume that we were just talking about, Dormammu was the mastermind behind that plan, with Umar joining her power to his. So although she ended up holding Hulk prisoner and besting him in romantic combat, Dormammu was the one who successfully laid the trap to capture the Hulk and the other Defenders, defeating them, at least temporarily. I mean, the one thing with villains being more powerful than superheroes or defeating them is that in the end, we do have to follow the formula of the hero's journey, because that's kind of what superhero stories are. So while the hero may be forced to struggle and persevere against great odds, in the end, they must always come up at some point victorious. Unless, of course, we are exploring some darker reality that exists within the multiverse, but the mainstay will pretty much always come back around to a victory for heroes like the Defenders. Number 2. Thanos. Thanos beat Hulk hard during Infinity War, which narrative-wise really helped to establish where Thanos fell in terms of his power ranking in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which if you hadn't guessed, turned out to be pretty high up there. It was less of a fall and more of like a just crown. Thanos is the top, at least at that time. Especially when he had the Infinity Gauntlet in tow with any, and especially if with all Infinity Stones on it. Thanos during Infinity War runs into the Hulk right near the beginning as he is traveling with the surviving Asgardians following the events of Thor Ragnarok. However, these Asgardian survivors won't be surviving for long, as even when the Hulk tries to stand up to Thanos and fight back against him, he is quickly and easily defeated. As Hulk hurtles back to Earth when he lands as Bruce Banner in the New York Sanctum Sanctorium, his desire to warn others of Thanos' arrival is extremely urgent, and with good reason. I mean, he really just got his butt whooped there, so yeah. Number 1. Doctor Doom. I mean, of course Doctor Doom could beat the Hulk. Doctor Doom could probably beat, well, just about anyone. He's so popular and so powerful and so smart. The then gray-skinned Hulk and Doctor Doom faced off in issue 320 of the Fantastic Four. Here, Doom uses his wits to take control of the Hulk, attempting to use the brute force of the hero for his own means. In this case, what Doom wanted was to retake control of his country, Latveria. In order to gain the Hulk's help, he tormented him by scrambling his brain impulses, until the Hulk finally agreed to hear Doom out, and following that, Doom used his manipulative skills to convince the Hulk to help him take back control of Latveria from the FF and go toe-to-toe with the Thing. Which honestly, I don't even know if you really need to make Hulk do that. I feel like you just need to be like, you should fight the Thing, and he'll be like, well, I do that a lot. We do like to fight. Number 10. J. Jonah Jameson. While JJ might not seem like the craziest supervillain out there, he has his moments, truly. Sure, he's just a guy who most of the time causes Spider-Man more grief in his civilian identity of Peter Parker, as his loudmouthed, often angry, and and demanding boss, but if he gets his hands on robots, whew, watch out. JJ isn't at the level of world domination underestimation, but for the most part, Spider-Man fans generally just think of JJ as a nuisance, a menace, if you will, to Peter's everyday life. However, JJ has not only threatened Peter's livelihood and Spider-Man's reputation, but has also even gone toe-to-toe with Spider-Man himself, and even at one point took on She-Hulk. Typically, he's at his most dangerous whenever he gets his hands on the Spider Slayer robots or armor, which he often uses to more directly hunt Spider-Man or other heroes down himself, using muscles, or robo-muscles I guess, as opposed to just the written word. And let's not forget that the written word and media itself are also way more powerful than we maybe give them credit for, both in the comics and in real life. Number 9. Sandman. The only thing that really holds Sandman back from being so deadly is his own disinterest in crime. In the end, Sandman often resents what he has become and even grows to resent being a criminal. There are even times in the comics when Sandman has tried to turn over a new leaf and go against his story as a villain, becoming reformed, preferring to stay neutral, lawful, and of course even at times teaming up and aiding heroes. This is really what holds him back though. That, and in some cases, the vacuum cleaner. Though really that shouldn't have been able to hold Sandman at all, considering that he can control the sand that makes him up, which means that, yeah, he can just kinda like move out of the vacuum cleaner, right? As sand particles. Sand is a powerful substance. It can cut you, it can get inside a wound, it's minuscule, it can get through and into almost any room or location, as it can pass through the smallest nooks and crannies. Sandman is also virtually immortal and can create duplicates of himself, allowing him to access a giant form by balling up all of these duplicates together. Now imagine if he did something like this, but on the scale of all of the sand in the world. Let's not forget that scientists have estimated that there are more grains of sand on planet Earth than stars within our universe. I know stars are bigger than grains of sand, but still, there's a lot of sand on this planet, like a lot of sand. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Spider-Man villains, let us know by clicking that like button. Number 8. Morbius. Another villain that is really only curbed, I think, because of his often more heroic nature and sense of humanity is Morbius. Okay, so Morbius might not be a global level threat like we were talking about in the intro, but he's definitely more powerful than you might think. A lot of people probably don't think about Morbius much at all, I imagine, but like the Lizard, if he's completely feral and unreserved, he's pretty dangerous. Recently in the comics, we saw that Morbius is back to being a fearsome, uncontrolled, ruled by his hunger, pseudo-science vampire, when he comes up against Ben Reilly's Spider-Man during the Beyond Spider-Man event. Ben struggled to fight against Morbius, and if it wasn't for some help from Beyond, he may have even died as a result of their battle. In the end, it took the Daughters of the Dragon duo, Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, together to take down Morbius, and even then, they may have only been able to do so because Morbius at that point was missing an arm. Dr. Michael Morbius can be quite strong when his power is completely unleashed, and there's nothing holding him back. Number 7. Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson isn't a villain anymore in the comics, but he did start out as one. And from his humble beginnings, you likely would not have imagined that he'd become so powerful as a character. Flash Thompson started out as Peter Parker's schoolyard bully. He didn't have any powers, he was just kind of a jerk. Over time though, Flash became less of an oaf and eventually even became a friend to Peter. He then goes on to serve in the military, becoming a decorated hero, and even becomes a superhero after he becomes Agent Venom, teaming up with the Venom symbiote, who also has a villainous origin story. Sure, Agent Anti-Venom, aka Flash Thompson, probably won't be the guy threatening the entire world, because, well, he's a hero, but he definitely now possesses enough power to instead be a hero who could potentially save the world. And considering that he was just your average run-of-the-mill high school bully, you probably wouldn't have expected him to come so far. Number 6. Sauron. I've always felt bad for Sauron. Like, this dude does not get enough love when it comes to our boosting of supervillains here on the channel. I know Sauron seems kinda silly on paper, but he's also pretty diabolical and deadly when he wants to be. And if the person writing the character also believes in his prowess. Sauron can temporarily absorb mutant powers, is super strong, and somehow has functional pterodactyl hands that he can use to pick up weapons and items. I don't even know how he does that. That's nuts to me. Sauron is also an energy vampire, which means his powers are literally deadly. He needs life force energy to live, and when he absorbs life force energy, it can actually result in the death of his victim. Honestly, I think if he just had the right team up, he could be pretty unstoppable. Maybe with X-Men Green he'll be able to do something crazy. I really want X-Men Green to be like a supervillain team. Like kinda like Poison Ivy. Like, we're villains but we're like saving the planet. Number 5. Sin Eater. Sin Eater saw a massive power upgrade recently. Initially he was just a crazed man obsessed with absolving the sins of others through killing them. But more recently, in Nick Spencer's run on Spider-Man in 2020, he became so much more than that. In issue number 46, we see Sin Eater with newfound powers to actually absorb and absolve the sin of villains, and with those sins, he would also gain their powers. This meant that the sky was almost the limit for just how powerful of a villain Sin Eater could become. However, after learning that he was being manipulated by Kindred and kinda used as a pawn, Sin Eater became distraught and ended up taking his own life. He would later be resurrected as a corpse, but we don't really know what happened to said corpse after he was brought back and the fight against Kindred sort of came to a close. He could still be out there somewhere though, and who knows, he could have some of his former hyped up powers. I doubt it, but even if he doesn't, he did have it at one point, so I think we should count it. It was pretty cool. Number 4. Chameleon. Chameleon is definitely a hero who deserves more love and respect, or at least more disdain if you love to hate the greatest villains. He was the first villain that Spider-Man ever faced in his own series. A lot of people don't think of shapeshifters or masters of disguise first when it comes to power levels, but the reality is someone who is really good at disguising themselves as other people can be one of the most deadly and unstoppable villains around. I mean, look at what Mystique managed to do recently in X-Men's Inferno series, or look at what Chameleon might seemingly be up to currently in Devil's Reign. Not only is Chameleon great at creating chaos and hurting others by disguising himself as them, but he also is pretty good at just hatching plans as well. Number 3. Kingpin. When it comes to Kingpin, we usually think of him as a threat confined to New York City. In fact, some people don't even think of Kingpin at all when it comes to Spider-Man. Over the years, Kingpin has become more synonymous with the superhero Daredevil, even though Kingpin's first appearance was actually in a Spider-Man comic, making his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 50 during the original 1963 series. Lately in the comics, Kingpin has been setting his sights on a much more grand prize than just causing grief for New York, its citizens, and its heroes. He is taking on all of the superheroes based in the US that oppose him as he aims to run for president, using Kilgrave, yes, the Purple Man's powers, to encourage everyone to vote for him. Or else. Superheroes who do not ally themselves with Kingpin in this endeavor will face his wrath during Marvel's Devil's Reign event. Number 2. Mysterio. Another villain that often gets dismissed when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery is Mysterio. Mysterio is a villain that is all smoke and mirrors, and illusions, which makes a lot of folks consider him to be not so real of a threat. Still, in the cinematic take on the character, we saw Mysterio almost completely fool the entire world, or while even being defeated, he kind of still did that. His plan here was to convince everyone that he was a hero and win them over to his side, and even despite seemingly dying, he actually still managed to kind of succeed. In the Old Man Logan universe, Mysterio is also the one behind defeating pretty much all of the X-Men by tricking Wolverine into thinking all of his friends were really supervillains, thereby getting Wolverine to kill the entire X-Men team and the school. Yikes. In other words, just because you think something isn't real doesn't mean that you shouldn't still fear it and that it can't still hurt you. A great illusion can be more powerful than actual action in some cases. Number 1. Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus is a villain that might be well respected among Spider-Man fans, but on a greater scale, he's not likely someone you think of when you think of a global level supervillain threat. But while he might not share the status of comic book villains like Doctor Doom, it doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to instill that level of fear among the superhero community. Dr. Octopus might seem a bit silly with his haircut and his mechanical arms and his sometimes snazzy white suit and sunglasses, but let's not forget that he's actually a diabolical super genius whose brilliance combined with the sheer strength of his claws makes him a dangerous person to cross. Some might say he's just superior.
Number 10. The UFOs. The UFOs are a group of Hulk villains who wanted to recreate the accident that gave the Fantastic Four their powers. They hired the engineers who built the Fantastic Four's original ship and set off, hoping to be pelted by cosmic rays. Their ground facility was discovered by Bruce Banner, who thought the team were being exposed to the rays by accident and brought the shuttle down. The team resented the fact that Banner tried to save them, as they thought that longer exposure would have made them even more powerful. This resentment caused them to vow revenge on Banner and the Hulk. The UFOs have 4 members: Ironclad, X-Ray, Vapor, and Vector. Ironclad was transformed by the cosmic rays into organic metal that he can control, making him able to increase or decrease his weight at will. This allows him to hover in the air or come down on his enemies with the force of a mountain. He also has superhuman strength and durability. X-Ray was transformed into living energy and therefore can't really be hurt. He can fly, turn invisible, and emit radiation blasts, as well as negative gamma rays, which allow him to transform Hulk back into his human form. I suppose he could also use this power to give most of the Avengers cancer. Vapor can transform into any gas she wants, usually using it to poison her enemies. Vector has telekinetic powers which he can use to move objects as well as focus into blasts, which have shown to be able to flay most of the Hulk's skin. Sure, the Hulk has managed to take them out on his own, but if they can get him off the board with X-Ray's powers, the other Avengers will have a challenge taking out this supergroup gone bad.
In at number 9 is the Sinister Six. Spider-Man is one of the best heroes Marvel has to offer. Maybe not the most powerful, but arguably the most popular and inspiring. But gosh darn it if he doesn't have a knack for absolutely ticking off his villains with incredibly good, and some might say annoying, quips. He drives villains insane, which is likely why his 6 greatest villains came together to try and bring him down for good. The original team was made up of Dr. Octopus, Electro, Kraven the Hunter, Mysterio, Sandman, and the Vulture, and each one of these villains can arguably give the Avengers a hell of a time on their own, but together they are a force to be reckoned with. There have been multiple different versions of this team, with other villains swapping out, and sometimes they've even had more than just 6 villains on the team. Dr. Octopus, Electro, and the Vulture are usually there, but some other strong villains who have shown up on this team include Green Goblin and Hobgoblin, Lizard, Rhino, Scorpion, Shocker, Venom, and Swarm. Now, I'm keeping them all the way up here because honestly, they get beaten way too often by Spider-Man alone, and they have a huge weakness in the form of being incredibly bad at cooperating with one another. Although, when the Sinister 12 came for Spider-Man, he needed the help of Black Cat, Captain America, Iron Man, Daredevil, Yellow Jacket, and the Fantastic Four for them to hold their own, which is a hell of a feat for the villains. I'll give them that.
Number 8. Alpha Strike. Due to my compulsive need to slowly turn this into an Alpha Flight channel, I present to you Alpha Strike. Alpha Strike is a team led by the Master of Evil, who with a group of villains and a few mind-controlled heroes managed to take over Canada and nearly destroy Alpha Flight in the process. Members of this team include a brainwashed Vindicator who has a battle suit that allows her to lift heavy objects, fly, teleport herself westward at the speed of the Earth's rotation, and fire energy beams that can incinerate a person with ease. Other members include Purple Woman, who like her father the Purple Man can compel people to do whatever she tells them, Citadel, who has a healing factor and adamantium armor grafted onto his body, as well as super strength so powerful he was able to send Colossus flying, the Wendigo, who routinely gives the Hulk a run for his money, and Ranark, who is a powerful user of dark magic, who was once a shaman who tried to claim enough power to become a god. And to anyone who doesn't think the Master would be a threat to the Avengers, I remind you that he already was, as it was he, disguised as Canada's ambassador to the Alpha Flight space program, who manipulated the Inhuman Profiler's evidence in order to isolate Captain Marvel and help cause the second Marvel Civil War. Number 7. The Liberators. Hailing from the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, the Liberators are a group of supervillains who, with under-the-table support from the governments of Russia, France, China, North Korea, Iran, and Syria, invaded the United States. In an effort to counter the United States super team, the Ultimates, the team consisted of each country's version of a super super soldier, as well as thousands of mercenaries who each had battle suits that granted them super strength and flight, but shortened their lifespans to only 1 month. Due to extensive planning before the invasion to counter the Ultimates, the Liberators were able to successfully invade in just a few days, taking out the Fantastic Four, the Ultimates reserves, as well as Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Spider-Man. The Colonel is an Iranian version of Captain America, having a similar power set. This universe's version of the Abomination is from China, but is otherwise very similar to his 616 counterpart. Crimson Dynamo is a Chinese Iron Man who has a battlesuit as well as 50 giant-sized duplicates that he can control. Perrin is the Russian equivalent of Thor, sporting a hammer and a sickle. Hurricane is a North Korean speedster. The ultimate version of Swarm is a mutant woman from Syria who can control millions of bugs at a time. Schizoid Man is the Frenchman who can duplicate himself in a manner similar to Multiple Man. And rounding out the team is the god of mischief himself, Loki, who doesn't have a personal stake in the fight, but thought it could be fun to help start World War III. Between all these superpowered foes and their augmented army, the Avengers of Earth 616 would have a hard time overcoming these Liberators.
Coming in at number 6 is Intelligentsia. While some teams have power in raw strength or battle prowess, Intelligentsia has brain power, which basically means they get away with things much more often and for much longer. The team is made up of some of the smartest villainous minds. The leader, MODOK, Mr. Sinister, Wizard, Dr. Doom, Egghead, Claw, Mad Thinker, and more have all at some point been a part of this group. Initially, they formed to exchange information between themselves, but then began collecting parts of the Library of Alexandria scattered in some of the most legendary places, because that's just how it works, and they even caused the arrival of the Beyonder. But in my humble opinion, the team became much cooler during World War Hulk. When Hulk came back to Earth, waging war on the planet, Leader brought the team together, and using their knowledge to hack into defense satellites and harness cosmic energy, they brought the hulking behemoth all the way down to the ground. Using this tech, they managed to figure out how to use cosmic energy and gamma radiation to create incredibly powerful beings like the Red Hulk, Red She-Hulk, A-Bomb, and Amadeus Cho, although this led to their defeat because they're still villains. But in World War Hulk, they managed to succeed where the heroes had failed, and that's saying something. Now we have the new Intelligentsia, and I'm excited to see them do something truly villainous and very cool.
Number 5, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. A frequent foe of the X-Men, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is a group formed by Magneto with the goal of either eradicating or subjugating humanity so that mutant kind can take their place as the dominant species on Earth. While membership has fluctuated over the years, it has played host to villains such as Magneto, who has been able to take on the Avengers by himself in the past, as well as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, who of course later joined the Avengers. Some of the other members they have had over the years include Mystique, Toad, the Juggernaut, the Blob, Pyro, Mastermind, and Sabretooth, just to name a few. With these powerful team members and their Omega-level leader, it would take an impressive roster of Avengers to triumph over this Brotherhood. I mean, what's Iron Man going to do against the Master of Magnetism other than die horribly? The Brotherhood consistently gives the X-Men a run for their money, and frankly, the X-Men are usually way more powerful than the Avengers, so Earth's mightiest heroes would have one hell of a fight on their hands. In order to even stand a chance, they would have to be fighting with a roster that includes Captain Marvel and the Hulk.
Coming in at number 4 is the Dark Avengers. Okay, so after the events of Civil War, Iron Man became head of S.H.I.E.L.D. This was pretty quickly followed by the Secret Invasion event where the entire world was basically infiltrated by the Skrulls under Tony Stark's watch. That led the people of the world to not trust him as S.H.I.E.L.D's leader, and so Norman Osborn of all people was chosen as the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and somehow a lot of people thought that was a good idea. Norman did a mass rebranding, turning S.H.I.E.L.D. into Hammer, which doesn't actually stand for anything, it just sounds cool. His Thunderbolts became a Black Ops team, and a bunch of Avengers quit, which prompted him to take on new members. Bullseye, Moonstone, and Venom, who are all loyal members of the Thunderbolts, came in dressing up as Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, and Spider-Man respectively. Two extremely strong Avengers, Ares God of War and Robert Reynolds the Sentry, both remained on the team. Then there was also Daken, the son of Wolverine, adopting a costume like his dad's, and Novar, a Kree who took on the Captain Marvel title. Lastly, Osborn himself suited up in a suit of Iron Man armor, but with the Captain America red, white, and blue, plus a star, dubbing himself itself the Iron Patriot. A team that includes Sentry is almost always a powerhouse, but then you add these other team members and manipulate Sentry to unleashing the Void. The heroes had their hands full just trying to deal with these Dark Avengers and Norman Osborn's hammer. And in at number 3 is the Horseman of Apocalypse. Every time the ancient, incredibly powerful mutant Apocalypse shows up to cause a headache for the heroes, he is almost always accompanied by his horsemen. Extremely powerful mutants, and sometimes non-mutants, chosen by Apocalypse to receive biological, genetic, and celestial enhancements that push their power to a substantially higher level. They can have their powers augmented or receive completely new powers altogether, whatever would help Apocalypse and whatever his current goal is. Some of the most powerful beings have been one of the Horsemen at some point. I'm talking characters like the Sentry, Hulk, Wolverine, Sunfire, Polaris, Psylocke, and Gambit. But even characters that hadn't existed before showed up as his Horsemen, and they were intense. Apocalypse's final Horseman team, for example, were all largely unheard of characters, but there was Decimus Furious, who was a giant Minotaur looking guy from way back in the Roman Empire, Jeb Lee, who can give people cancer and cause their flesh to be eaten away by playing on the drums, which is just odd. Sanjar Javid could transmit a whole spectrum of different deadly diseases via metal, and then there was Ishizumi, who could detach her jaw and send an absolutely massive and terrifying swarm of Yume beetles that could devour or dismember her target and steal their memories. Like what? And I haven't even spoken about the first Horseman, and I'm not going to.
Number 2, the Black Order. The goal of the Mad Titan Thanos is to wage war on life itself in an effort to impress the woman he loves, who also happens to be Death. In order to help him with this goal, he has assembled a team of aliens to serve as his generals, the Black Order. Members include Corvus Glaive, who is not only a tactical genius, but immortal as long as his blade remains intact. Hela, the goddess of death, the Primordial Elder, the Challenger, who can access residual energy from the Big Bang, the telekinetic sorcerer Ebony Maw with persuasive powers, Black Swan, who can shoot optic blasts and has so much strength that she escaped from a prison designed to hold a Herald of Galactus, Black Dwarf, who is pretty much just big and strong, and Proxima Midnight, who is an expert combatant with super strength, endurance, and near invulnerability. They were memorably featured in the Infinity War movie and caused just as much if not more trouble for the heroes in the comics as they do in the film.
And in at number 1 is the Cabal in Secret Wars. You know, if you create a group for the sole purpose of destroying planets, you know they have got to be pretty powerful. And the Cabal, created by Namor the Submariner, are absolutely powerful. So, during Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, these things called incursions started to happen, orchestrated by the Beyonders. Essentially, 2 multiverses would crash together, destroying them both, and the focal point for that crash was the Earth itself. When the incursions started to threaten the multiverse, Namor had a different view from the rest of the Illuminati, and during the incursion with Earth 4290001, Namor destroyed that Earth to save both universes and save his Earth. Now when the next incursion presented itself right after that, the Illuminati were going to just let it happen instead of destroying an entire alternate Earth. Standing against that, Namor teamed up with Maximus the Mad of the Inhumans, and then together they freed the prisoners of the Illuminati, which included Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, Terrax, the Herald of Galactus from Earth 13054, Black Swan, and the Mad Titan Thanos himself. Basically, this is like the Black Order from the last point, plus some insanely powerful additions. And they are very powerful. This group of villainous powerhouses were sanctioned by the United Nations to destroy the alternate Earths that appeared during incursions. While Namor had planned to use explosions to destroy the other Earths, Thanos, who pretty much took control of the group, led them in what was basically a complete and utter slaughter. After Namor tried to betray the group during another incursion, they instead became trapped on the other Earth and escaped to the ultimate 1610 universe, where they welcomed an evil alternate version of Reed Richards, known as the Maker, onto that team, making them even more powerful. When they survive the end of the multiverse and end up on Battleworld, this group was strong enough to face an army of Thors, but they didn't really stand a chance against God Emperor Doom.